Welcome to Reformed Thinking.
It is a privilege to be here with you today.
So we have a pretty massive task ahead of us for this deep dive.
We really do.
We are taking a single chapter of the Bible, Psalm 91, and we are just going to live in it for the next hour or so.
Yeah.
Now, usually when people think of Psalm 91, they think of it as a poem.
Right.
Maybe something you read at a funeral.
Right.
Or, something you see cross-stitched on a pillow in a grandmother's house.
Right, yeah. It has that reputation of being a comfort text.
Yeah.
A soft place to land.
But as we dug into Charles Spurgeon's The Treasury of David for this deep dive, I was struck by how much more aggressive this text is.
Very much so.
Spurgeon doesn't just call it a poem. He calls it heavenly medicine.
And that is a vital distinction to make right up front.
Yeah.
Spurgeon is writing this in the 19th century. Medicine wasn't just about comfort back then, it was about survival.
Wow. Right.
He quotes a German physician who actually used to refer to Psalm 91 as the best preservative in times of cholera.
Cholera. I mean, that paints a very different picture than a cross-stitched pillow.
Absolutely.
We are talking about a time when pestilence was a legitimate, terrifying reality for people.
Yes, and Spurgeon says something striking right at the outset of his commentary.
What's that?
He says that the man who lives in the spirit of this psalm would be fearless even if London were to become a Lazar house again.
A Lazar house. That is an old term for a quarantine hospital for lepers or plague victims, correct?
Spot on. It is a place of death.
Man.
Spurgeon says even if the graves were gorged with carcasses, the person who truly grasps Psalm 91 stands firm.
That is heavy.
It is. But, and this is the big caveat for our Reformed listeners, we have to be extremely careful with how we apply this.
Careful in what way?
Because this text is dangerous if handled incorrectly.
Okay.
It is the very text Satan used to tempt Jesus in the wilderness. It promises protection, yes. But if we read it as a magic spell, saying, I say these words so I won't get the flu, we have moved from faith into presumption.
Right.
And presumption is a sin.
That is the tension we need to handle today for you, the listener. We want the comfort of the promises, but we definitely do not want the bad theology.
Agreed.
So our mission for this deep dive is to parse that out. We're going to look at the authorship, the specific secret place, the dangers described, and the agency of how God protects us.
It is the only way to do it justice.
And we're going to do it verse by verse. Let's start with a mystery that I honestly did not know existed until I read these notes.
Oh, the title.
Yeah. I open my Bible, I turn to Psalm 91, and there is no title.
Nothing.
Psalm 90 says a prayer of Moses. Psalm 92 says a psalm or a song for the Sabbath day. But 91 is just blank.
Yeah.
I have always just assumed it was David.
Most people do. David is the sweet psalmist of Israel, so it feels like his voice.
Right.
But there is a very strong tradition, one that Spurgeon highlights and agrees with, that attributes this psalm to Moses.
Moses.
Yeah.
That seems so unexpected to me. Why Moses?
Well, first, there's a rule among the ancient Jewish doctors.
The scholars who organized the Hebrew canon.
Yes. They argued that when you find an orphan Psalm 1 without a title, it belongs to the author of the psalm immediately preceding it.
So because Psalm 90 is explicitly given to Moses.
Psalm 91 is assumed to be the continuation of Moses' thought.
Okay, that makes sense.
But honestly, that is just a technicality of editing. The real proof is in the internal evidence, the texture of the language itself.
What do you mean by texture?
If you read the Hebrew idioms, the phrases used in Psalm 91 sound incredibly similar to the book of Deuteronomy.
Oh, interesting.
But more than that, look at the imagery. Pestilence, fiery serpents, scorpions, the destruction that wastes at noonday.
Yeah.
Does that sound like David sitting in a cedar palace in Jerusalem?
No, that sounds like the wilderness.
Precisely. It sounds like the desert wandering. It fits the experience of the Israelites under Moses perfectly.
Wow.
They were surrounded by death daily. Scorpions and snakes were a literal physical threat every time they set up camp.
That actually changes how I hear the song completely.
How so?
If David writes it, it is a king writing about God's protection from political enemies, or maybe a specific battle.
Right.
But if Moses writes it, this is a man who watched an entire generation die.
You hit the theological nail on the head there. Remember, the generation that came out of Egypt was sentenced to die in the wilderness because of their unbelief.
Yeah, that's right.
Moses presided over a 40-year funeral procession.
That is such a bleak image, a 40-year funeral procession.
It is. But that is what makes Psalm 91 so weighty. Spurgeon points out that there were two men who lived through that entire funeral procession.
Joshua and Caleb.
Yes, Joshua and Caleb. They saw 1,000 fall at their side and 10,000 at their right hand, quite literally.
And it did not come near them. They were the only two of that generation to enter the promised land.
So when we read this as a Mosaic psalm, Joshua and Caleb become the living illustrations of it.
That is fascinating.
It is not a theoretical poem about safety. It is a biography of two men who dwelled in God while everyone else was just visiting.
Okay, you mentioned dwelling. That leads us right into verse 1.
Let's hear it.
He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty.
We have to stop right there and look at that word, dwelleth.
It seems simple enough to me. Living somewhere.
In English, yes. But in the Hebrew context, and specifically in the Reformed view of communion with God, there is a massive distinction between dwelling and visiting.
Okay.
Spurgeon is ruthless on this point. He asks a very direct question. Do you run to God only when the storm hits, or is God your everyday address?
Ah, the foxhole atheist idea.
Yeah.
Or even the foxhole Christian.
Right. Many believers treat God like a hotel.
A hotel.
Yeah. You check in when you are traveling through a rough patch, you stay for a night or two, and then you check out when the sun comes up and things are fine again.
Man, that hits close to home.
That person is a visitor. The promise of Psalm 91, the immunity, the protection we are going to read about, is not for the visitor.
That is a hard truth. It means the promise is conditional.
It is conditional. It is for the inhabitant. Wow.
Spurgeon talks about the Holy of Holies to illustrate this. In the tabernacle, you had the outer courts where the people came to offer sacrifices.
Right.
You had the holy place where the priests went daily to tend the lamps and the bread.
Mm-hmm.
But the secret place, the sether, in Hebrew, was the inner sanctuary.
Where the Ark of the Covenant was.
Yes. To dwell there implies a level of intimacy that is almost scandalous. It is the elect out of the elect.
Elect out of the elect. Unpack that phrase for us.
Well, all Christians are God's children, but not all Christians press into that deep, constant communion.
Okay.
Some are content to be saved and just stay in the outer court. They have their fire insurance, so to speak.
Right. They just want to be inside the gate.
But the psalm is written for the one who pushes past the veil, the one who wants to be where the ark is, constantly.
And if you are in that secret place, the text says you abide under the shadow of the Almighty.
Think about the physics of a shadow for a second. To be in someone's shadow, where do you have to be?
You have to be right next to them. Close. Very close. And if the person casting the shadow is massive, the shadow covers you completely.
Oh, I see.
Spurgeon connects us directly to the wings of the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant.
The golden statues on top of the lid.
Yes. They stretched out their wings over the mercy seat. To abide under the shadow is to live your life sandwiched between the wings of the cherubim.
That sounds incredibly safe, but also somewhat terrifying. You are in the immediate, unshielded presence of a holy God.
And that is why the names of God in verse 1 and 2 are so critical to understand. We cannot just gloss over them.
Let's dig into them then.
We have 4 distinct titles used here in rapid succession: Elyon, Shaddai, Jehovah, and Elohim.
I know Jehovah and Elohim, those are pretty common.
Yeah.
But break down the first 2 for us. Elyon, that translates to the Most High, right?
Yes. Elyon speaks of absolute sovereignty. It means he is the possessor of heaven and earth.
Okay.
If you are hiding under Elyon, you are hiding under the one who outranks every single other power in existence. Satan, he is just a subordinate disease, just a servant. Elyon is the absolute sovereign over the universe.
Okay. And Shaddai, that is Almighty in my English Bible.
Almighty is the standard translation, yes. But the root of the word is fascinating. Some Hebrew scholars trace it to shad, which means breast.
Really?
Yes. It implies not just raw power, like a warrior with a sword, but sustaining power, like a nursing mother.
That is a beautiful image.
It is the all-sufficient one, the one who nourishes and sustains life itself.
So we have the sovereign ruler who outranks everything,
Yeah.
and the sustaining nourisher who provides everything.
Right. And then in verse 2, the psalmist makes a very distinct shift. He switches from describing God saying, he is this, he is that, to claiming God personally.
You may read it. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in him will I trust.
That little word, my Spurgeon, seems to absolutely love that word.
He really does.
He says it is the handle by which we grasp God.
Yes.
You can know God is a refuge, but that does not save you. You have to be able to say, he is my refuge. It is the language of covenant possession.
It reminds me of Martin Luther. Did he not say much of the Christian faith is in the pronouns?
He did. The devil can say God is almighty. The devil knows that is a historical and theological fact.
Right.
But the devil cannot say, he is my God, in a posture of love and trust. That is the exclusive privilege of the believer.
That is such a good point.
And Spurgeon has a bit of a rebuke here for the intellectuals of his day, and honestly, it applies to ours too.
Oh, I saw that note in the text. The audacious pretenders to culture.
Yes. He is talking about the skeptics, the people who think it is sophisticated to doubt, to deconstruct, to cast suspicion on Scripture.
We have plenty of those today.
We do. Spurgeon says, in the face of that kind of skepticism, the believer has a duty to be vocal.
Because the text says, I will say of the Lord.
Exactly. Do not just think it privately. Say it. When the world is loud about its doubt, we must be loud about our fortress.
So we have established the fortress. We have the walls, the moat, the drawbridge. We are dwelling inside.
We are secure.
But why do we need a fortress in the first place?
Yeah.
This brings us to the darker part of our deep dive.
The threats.
Yeah. Verses 3 through 8 describe the threat environment, and it is comprehensive.
It is a complete horror show if you read it closely.
It starts with the snare of the fowler. Verse 3 says, Surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence.
Let's unpack that.
I have always just glossed over fowler. It is just a bird hunter, right?
It is a bird hunter, yes. But think about the metaphor being used. What is the believer being compared to?
A bird.
A bird, not a lion, not a warrior.
Right.
A bird, silly, weak, skittish, easily frightened, and very often hungry and easily lured by bait.
That is a humbling comparison.
It is meant to be. The fowler who represents Satan does not hunt with a trumpet and a marching band.
He does not announce himself.
No. He hunts in silence. He uses traps. He studies the habits of the bird and places the net exactly where the bird likes to feed.
So the danger here is not a frontal assault. It is deception.
It is pure deception. Spurgeon identifies the snares specifically as the pestilence of error and the pestilence of sin.
The pestilence of error.
This is crucial for the Reformed listener to grasp. We often read Psalm 91 and think about physical protection, car accidents, burglars, sickness.
Sure.
But the primary danger in the wilderness was not just physical death, it was apostasy. It was drifting away from the truth.
The trap you do not see until it snaps shut.
Right, and notice the pairing in the verse. The snare, which is hidden, and the pestilence, which is fatal.
Okay.
Spurgeon links them beautifully. He says God is a spirit, so he protects us against evil spirits, the snare.
Right.
And God is immortal, so he redeems us from mortal sickness, the pestilence. The protection covers both the soul and the body.
Man, that is thorough. And then, right after this scary image of the trap, we get verse 4. And it is arguably the tenderest image in the entire Old Testament.
It is quite a contrast.
He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust.
It is shocking language, really. Spurgeon calls it transcendent condescension.
Why condescension?
Because God is comparing himself to a hen, a farm bird.
Yeah, that is wild to think about.
If you or I wrote a poem about the omnipotent creator of the universe, we would compare him to a thunderstorm or a mountain or a supernova.
Something majestic.
We would definitely not compare him to a mother hen protecting her chicks in a barnyard.
It feels very domestic, almost vulnerable.
But that is the point. It conveys a warmth and a nearness that the word fortress just does not have.
The fortress is cold.
Cold stone. Feathers are warm, living things. It implies that God actually puts his own life between you and the danger.
Wow. But Spurgeon is quick to point out, do not let the feathers fool you. There is steel underneath those feathers.
Yes. The verse continues. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. The feathers hide the armor.
Help us out with the medieval weaponry here. Shield versus buckler. What is the difference?
The shield, the sinna in Hebrew, is the large door-sized shield.
The kind that covers the whole body.
Yes. It is movable. You shift it to catch the arrows as they come at you. That represents God's active providence, blocking blows day by day.
Okay. And the buckler.
The buckler, the sotra, is different. It is more like a coat of mail that wraps all the way around your torso.
So you are completely surrounded.
You are encapsulated. And what is the material of this armor? It says his truth.
Not my faith.
No. And that is a massive, massive distinction for us. My faith is weak.
Yeah, mine definitely is.
My faith wavers depending on what I had for breakfast. If the shield was made of my faith, the arrows would punch right through it on a bad day.
That is so true.
But the shield is his truth. It is objective. It is the faithfulness of God to his covenant. It is the solid, unchanging reality of sound doctrine. That is what actually quenches the fiery darts.
I love that. It takes the pressure off me to conjure up enough belief energy to stay safe. The safety is in the object of the trust, not the intensity of my trust.
Precisely. You are safe because the armor is strong, not because you are holding it perfectly.
So we are armored up, which is good, because verses 5 and 6 unleash what Spurgeon calls the fourfold terror.
The onslaught.
We have the terror by night, the arrow by day, the pestilence in darkness, and the destruction at noonday.
It covers every quadrant of the clock and every possible type of threat.
Let's break them down for the listener. Terror by night.
This is the psychological weight of the wilderness, the sudden alarms, the spiritual dread,
The bump in the night.
the feeling that something is out there. It is the fear of the unknown when you cannot see your hand in front of your face.
And the arrow by day.
That is open warfare. The visible enemy, plots, slander, sudden temptations that strike you when you are wide awake and out in the open.
Then the pestilence in darkness.
That is what we would call infectious disease today. The miasma, as they used to call it in the old medical texts.
Right.
You cannot see it. It walks in the dark. It is the hidden virus creeping through the camp.
And finally, destruction at noonday.
Spurgeon links this to things like sunstroke, which was absolutely fatal in the desert, or open famine, things that are undeniable, public, and overwhelming.
But here is the key. And I think this is where many people misunderstand the song entirely.
What is that?
Verse 5 says, "Thou shalt not be afraid." It does not say, "Thou shalt not be shot."
That is the crux of the Reformed interpretation of this text. The blessing is freedom from the fear of evil, even if the evil is present.
This is really significant, so I want to slow down here. Are you saying a believer dwelling in the secret place can still get hit by the arrow by day?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
If we preach that Psalm 91 means Christians are physically immortal until they are 100 years old, we are liars.
History just disproves that.
Church history disproves it on every page. The apostles were martyred. Godly, faithful missionaries die of malaria on the field.
Faithful people get cancer.
Faithful people get cancer. So how is the promise true then? It says, "It shall not come nigh thee."
Yeah, how do we reconcile that?
Spurgeon navigates this beautifully. He argues that for the believer, the fundamental nature of the event changes.
How so?
If a worldling dies of the plague, it is a judgment. It is a curse. It is the beginning of their eternal sorrow.
Right.
But if a believer dies of the plague, the nature of the act is completely transformed. It becomes a chariot. It becomes a heavenly messenger sent to bring them home.
So the evil, in the ultimate sense of separation from God and destruction of the soul, cannot touch them.
Correct. The sting is drawn out of the event. The physical shell may be struck, but the kernel, the soul, is preserved perfectly safe.
Wow.
Spurgeon says it this way: sickness is medicine, death is gain. We have to view these physical promises through the lens of eternal security.
That is a hard pill to swallow when you were in the middle of a crisis, though.
It is very hard. It requires a robust theology of sovereignty. It requires believing that God is so in control that he even weaponizes death itself for our benefit.
Now, verses 7 and 8 give us this dramatic picture of immunity. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee.
It is an incredible visual.
Spurgeon uses some fascinating historical illustrations here. He talks about the Great Plague of London.
He does, and he brings up the stories of the clergy who stayed behind.
Wow.
You see, during the plagues in Europe, the wealthy and the powerful usually fled the cities immediately. They went to their country estates where the air was clean.
Social distancing, 17th century style.
Pretty much. But the pastors, the true shepherds of the flock, they often stayed in the infection zones.
Wow.
Spurgeon mentions the Bishop of Marseille and Montpesson, the rector of Ayam. These men voluntarily stayed in the Lazare house.
Knowing they could die.
Knowing the risks, they preached to the dying, they buried the dead, and in many documented cases, they were supernaturally preserved through the whole ordeal.
There is one story in the notes that I absolutely love. It is the story of Lord Craven.
Ah, yes, this is a classic Spurgeon anecdote.
Let's lay this out for the listener. So Lord Craven is a nobleman living in London when the plague hits.
Great plague.
Right. And he decides, naturally, to pack up and leave. He has his coach and 6 horses at the door. His baggage is packed.
He is ready to run.
He is literally putting on his gloves in the hallway, ready to bolt.
And then he overhears a conversation.
Right. His servant, Spurgeon, notes he was a black man, A postilion is talking to another servant in the hallway.
Just casual chatter.
And the postilion says, I suppose, by my lord's quitting London to avoid the plague, that his God lives in the country and not in town.
His God lives in the country. That is an absolute dagger to the heart.
It froze Lord Craven in his tracks.
It completely exposed his unbelief in that moment. He realized that by running, he was practically confessing that God's sovereignty had a geographic limit.
Yeah.
He was acting out the belief that God is strong in the country, but the plague is stronger than God in the city.
So what did he do?
He stopped everything. He ordered the horses unharnessed. He ordered the baggage brought back inside the house.
Wow.
He said, "My God lives in London." And he stayed.
And what happened?
And he was remarkably useful to the city. He ministered to his sick neighbors. He helped manage the crisis when all the other magistrates had fled. And he never caught the infection.
That gives me chills every time I hear it. It is such a simple, cutting challenge. Does your God only live in the safe places?
That is the question we have to ask ourselves when panic sets in. We often treat God like a fair weather friend.
We do.
But Psalm 91 is a storm weather promise.
But this brings us to a very tricky theological cliff.
Let's hear it.
Lord Craven stayed and was safe. But what if I stay and I do get sick? This leads us right into part 3 of our deep dive, and specifically the role of angels and the danger of presumption.
Right.
Because there is a fine line between faith and stupidity, is there not?
There is a very fine line. And the devil loves to blur that line as much as possible. We need to look at verses 11 and 12.
And specifically the text that Satan left out when he quoted this to Jesus.
Yes, the omitted text is everything here.
Let's start with the promise itself before we get to the loophole. He shall give his angels charge over thee.
Notice the plural there again, angels. It is not just one lonely guardian angel trying to keep up with you.
Right.
Spurgeon describes this as a bodyguard of the princes of the blood imperial of heaven.
I love that phrasing. It makes you think of the Secret Service, but cosmic.
That is a very fair comparison. Their function is described almost like a nurse carrying a small child. They shall bear thee up in their hands.
It suggests such tenderness.
It does, and look at the specific detail. Lest thou dash thy foot against a stone.
Why specify a stone? Why not say, lest thou fall off a cliff or get eaten by a bear?
Because we often need protection from the small things more than the big things.
How so?
Well, we prepare for the cliff, we look out for the bear, we are vigilant about the massive threats, but the loose stone, the tripping hazard?
We do not see those coming.
Exactly. That catches us off guard. Spurgeon points out that angels are just as concerned with our minor stumbles as they are with our major catastrophes.
But here comes the condition. The condition that Satan hates so much. To keep thee in all thy ways.
This is the crucial theological anchor for this section. In all thy ways implies ways of duty or lawful callings.
Talk to me about the temptation of Christ in Matthew 4, because this is where the theology gets extremely real.
In Matthew 4, Satan takes Jesus up to the pinnacle of the temple in Jerusalem.
Right.
He tells him to throw himself down to the courtyard below. And to justify this insane suggestion, he quotes Psalm 91.
He weaponizes the Bible.
He says, "It is written, he shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up."
He sounds very pious, quoting scripture like that.
The devil is a master theologian. He knows the Bible better than most of us ever will.
Yeah.
But he is a bad theologian because he twists it. He completely omitted the phrase "in all thy ways."
Why is that omission so significant?
Because throwing yourself off the temple pinnacle was not a way of duty. It was not a lawful calling. It was a stunt. It was pure presumption. If Jesus had jumped, he would have been tempting God, not trusting God.
So if I am walking in the path God has set for me my way, I am covered by this angelic protection.
Yes.
But if I decide to go base jumping without a parachute just to prove God is real, I am on my own.
Essentially, yes. If we go out of God's appointed ways, if we act recklessly, foolishly, or sinfully, we lose the warrant to claim the promise.
We step out from under the umbrella.
We must be in our station and calling.
Spurgeon uses the illustration of Jonah here to make this point.
Yes, Jonah is the perfect negative example for this doctrine. Jonah's way, his lawful God-ordained calling, was to go to Nineveh and preach repentance.
But he went to Tarshish.
He went the exact opposite direction. He bought a ticket on a boat going away from his duty.
It's out of his way.
And because he was out of his way, he did not meet an angel to bear him up when he fell into the sea.
No.
He met a whale to swallow him down into the dark.
Now God still used the whale?
God is always sovereign. So he used the whale as a severe mercy to bring Jonah back.
Right.
But Jonah did not have the comfort of Psalm 91 while he was suffocating in gastric juices. He was in rebellion.
So let's apply this to the plague doctor idea we were talking about earlier. Okay. If I walk into a hospital filled with an infectious disease because it is my job as a nurse, or because I am caring for my sick mother, I am in my way.
Correct. You are in the path of duty. You can legitimately claim the protection of Psalm 91.
But if I walk into a quarantine zone just to show off how holy and fearless I am,
You are tempting God. You are acting out of pride, not duty. You are out of your way, and you should not be surprised at all if you get sick.
that distinction saves us from so much bad theology out there today.
Yeah.
It keeps us grounded in reality.
It does. It balances faith with obedience, which is the hallmark of Reformed thought.
Moving on to verse 13, we see the believer victorious. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder.
Here we have a very vivid menagerie of threats. The lion represents open force, violence, and blatant wrath.
And the adder.
The adder represents hidden treachery, poison, the snake in the grass. Then the verse mentions the young lion and the dragon, which implies mysterious cunning and ancient, overwhelming evil.
It sounds like we're becoming literal dragon slayers here.
In a spiritual sense, yes. Spurgeon imagines the believer as the true George and the dragon.
Oh, the old legend.
Right. We walk through a world absolutely filled with spiritual monsters.
But how do we actually tread on them? I do not feel like a dragon slayer most days. I usually feel like the silly bird from verse 3.
And that is where the Reformed view anchors us firmly in Christ. This text is not about your personal superpower.
Thank goodness.
This is a direct foreshadowing of Genesis 3.15.
The first gospel promise in the Bible.
Right. God promised in the garden that the seed of the woman would bruise the serpent's head. Christ is the ultimate one who treads on the lion and the adder.
He defeated Satan at the cross.
Completely.
And what about Romans 16:20?
Paul writes to the church, "The God of peace shall bruise Satan under your feet shortly."
Under our feet.
Because we are in Christ, his victory practically becomes our victory. We tread on these dangers not because our boots are thick, but because we are standing on the shoulders of the one who has already won the war.
That is a massive comfort. Now, we are entering the final section of our deep dive today, part 4. The whole tone of the psalm shifts here in a beautiful way.
It really does.
Up until now, the psalmist has been speaking about God. He is my refuge, he shall cover thee. But in verse 14, the voice changes entirely.
It is a dramatic change in the text. God himself steps up to the microphone, so to speak.
Yeah.
The camera turns from the believer looking up to the king on the throne looking down. Because he hath set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him.
Why does God deliver? I think the natural human assumption is always because I was good enough.
That is the default setting of the human heart works righteousness. We always think we earn it.
Right.
But the text does not say, because he has kept my law perfectly, or because he's never sinned.
It says, because he hath set his love upon me.
Love, not raw merit. Spurgeon defines this setting love in a very specific, helpful way.
How so?
He defines it as a fixed, single-hearted attachment.
Okay.
It is the love of a limpet clinging to a rock in the ocean. It involves completely renouncing trust in creaturely comforts.
Forsaking all others.
Yes. It is binding oneself to God. It is the soul saying, I have no other option. I love you because you are my absolute only hope of survival.
And then the text adds a second reason. Because he hath known my name.
Knowing the name. We talked about the names of God earlier. Elion, Shaddai, Jehovah. This is not just intellectual trivia for a Sunday school class.
It is not just being able to pass a theology quiz.
No, not at all. In the biblical context, to know a name is to intimately know the character of the person.
Right.
You cannot trust a stranger with your actual life. You trust someone because you know their name, you know their reputation, their history, their track record.
You know who they are.
It means knowing him as justice, knowing him as mercy, knowing him as truth.
And specifically, for us under the new covenant, knowing him as revealed in Christ.
Spot on. You cannot know the Father truly except through the Son. The result of this deep knowledge, the text says, is that God sets him on high.
On high.
That implies inaccessible safety. It is a fortress built on a sheer cliff that the enemy simply cannot scale.
And then God gives us what Spurgeon calls the 6 I wills.
These are incredible promises.
It is like a blank check, signed by God with 6 distinct promises written on it. Let's run through them.
The first is, I will answer him.
Now that assumes the believer is actually calling out.
Yes, prayer is the native atmosphere of the secret place. If you dwell there, you are praying. The promise is not just that God hears, God is omniscient, he hears everything, but that he answers.
The second is, I will be with him in trouble.
This is one of the most moving points in Spurgeon's entire exposition. He uses the image of a mother and a sick child again.
Go on, lay that out for us.
He says when the child is healthy and running around the estate, the mother might leave him with the nurse or the servants. She goes about her business.
Right.
But when the child is sick, when the fever spikes in the middle of the night,
She dismisses the servant.
she sends everyone away. She sits by the bedside herself. She holds the cold cloth to the forehead. She says, I will be with him.
Man.
God's presence is most intimate in our deepest trouble. The angels might carry us when we are just stumbling along, but God himself sits with us when we are truly suffering.
That completely changes how I view trouble. It is not an evidence of God's absence. It is actually an opportunity for his nearness.
Precisely. It is an invitation to intimacy.
The third promise.
Yeah.
I will deliver him.
That is the actual rescue. Sometimes it is a physical rescue. The fever breaks, the car accident is narrowly avoided.
Right.
Sometimes it is spiritual. The temptation is finally overcome. But the deliverance is absolutely guaranteed.
Fourth, I will honor him.
This is surprising. You would expect God to say, I will save him, and that be the end of it. But honor.
Yeah, that seems like a bonus.
God confers dignity upon the delivered saint. It is not just a bare survival, like a shipwreck victim watching ashore half dead on a piece of driftwood.
Right.
It is a victory parade. We are, as Paul says, more than conquerors.
Fifth, with long life will I satisfy him.
Now, we need to interpret this carefully based on what we said earlier. Does this mean every Christian lives to be 100?
We already established that is not the case. We know many godly, faithful people who die young.
So what does long life actually mean then? The key word in the Hebrew here is satisfy.
Satisfy.
Spurgeon argues that the believer leaves life's banquet like a guest who has had enough to eat.
Oh, I see.
Whether they are 30 years old or 90 years old, they are content. They have fulfilled their God-given purpose. They are completely satisfied with what God has given them.
Contrast that with the world.
The wicked are often dragged away from the feast, kicking and screaming for more time.
Grasping for one more day.
Or the worldly person lives to be 100 but is empty, bitter, and cynical about everything. They are never satisfied.
Yeah.
But the saint, whenever their time comes, says, "It is well with my soul."
And the final promise, the grand climax of the song, I will show him my salvation.
This is the beatific vision. It is the full, unclouded reveal.
Show him, not just tell him.
We see through a glass darkly right now. We see hints of salvation. We see the shadow of the Almighty.
Right.
But in the end, we see the face of the Almighty. It is looking from the heights of Amana and Lebanon to the ultimate eternal rest. It is the moment faith finally becomes sight.
So what does this all mean for us today? We have unpacked a massive amount of theology over the last hour.
We have seen that real safety is found only in the secret place and dwelling, not just visiting on the weekends.
Right.
We have seen the balance of divine sovereignty, that God completely controls the pestilence and human responsibility, that we must trust and stay in our lawful ways of duty.
It brings me back to that question from Lord Craven's servant. I honestly cannot get it out of my head.
It is the question we should definitely leave the listeners with today. It is the ultimate diagnostic question for our faith.
Does your God live in the country?
Or does he live in the infected city too? Is he only God when the bank account is full and the blood work comes back clean?
Yeah.
Or is he God in the ICU? Is he God in the bankruptcy court?
We need to challenge ourselves. Each of you listening needs to examine your own heart. Are you just visiting God when it is convenient, or are you dwelling with him?
Because the promises of Psalm 91 are exclusively for the dwellers.
That is the defining lesson. Dwell in the secret place, and the shadow will cover you completely.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Reformed thinking. We hope this heavenly medicine strengthens your heart today.